All right, so we should be recording. So hi, everyone. Thank you so much for coming. I'm so happy to have you here. We're going to talk a little bit about kind of this general topic of identities abroad, but really more or less focusing on those benefits that I think are often not shared as much and as widely, but are really, really great. So I'll get to our little agenda for the day. So for today's topics, kind of as an overview, we'll talk a little bit about USAC as an organization and our people. And then we'll kind of go into sort of what sort of terms and concepts we're going to grapple with, maybe ask some rhetorical questions and just try to get that reflection piece started. We're also going to go into different types of benefits of study abroad. We also have some great tips and insights from some of us speakers who've studied abroad, as well as from other USAC student alum. So we really want to incorporate student voices into this presentation, and I hope you find it helpful. And then we'll try to end by giving you some more resources that you can look into, as well as have some time for Q&A. I did want to do a little bit of acknowledgement that I can hopefully speak for Victoria here, that we're not experts, and we definitely don't want to imply that we are. We're always learning. So, please give us that feedback as well. I think for USAC as an organization, our kind of care and focus for this topic really comes from this desire to learn more and better support our students. So we're really happy and we value our affordability as well as our accessibility and kind of the warmth of our staff. And we also pride ourselves in our low program fees, scholarship funds, passionate staff, and so much more. So I guess I could summarize by saying that our goal today is really to help kind of foster your own self-reflection and try to connect you with resources to hopefully help you when perhaps you're considering where to go or what you want to do, or if you're kind of that prospective phase, to help you begin researching and preparing, reaching out to family, friends, and loved ones and try to engage or try to give you a way to thoughtfully engage with your various identities, kind of acknowledge that, and also give you that support. But again, please don't hesitate to reach out to us directly or USAC in general, or your host university along the way. We definitely want to support you more and spend time chatting with you. So definitely feel free to follow up. So yeah, I think that's going to get us started. For now, I'll go ahead and turn it over to Victoria.
Hi, everyone. I'm going to talk a little bit about USAC before we get more into the specifics of identities, terms, and then examples and everything else on the agenda. So to start, who are we presenting today? So we can move to the next slide. So I'm Victoria. I am one of the university relations coordinators. So I work with the West Coast, Oregon, Washington, California, Alaska, and Hawaii. And then that's just kind of my overall at USAC. I've started pretty recently. I'm really happy to be here. And then we'll get a little bit more into our personal stories and why diversity, equity, inclusion, and identities mean so much to us within study abroad.
And just really quickly, my name is Caroline, pronouns she, her, and I'm based in Denver, Colorado, and I'm the University Relations Coordinator for what I call North/Central West. And again, I'll get more into my own story later, but I'll get back to Victoria on the next slide.
So just a quick overview of why study abroad with USAC. Studying abroad in general is great for student development. You can stay on track with your degree while studying in a new country. It's great for your resume. You gain cross-cultural skills, develop new relationships and networks, and living abroad before being tied to a career is fantastic. And then what USAC specifically offers is high quality academic programs, affordability, and scholarships. We have over 50 unique locations, a lot of support from our staff here in the US and while you're abroad. And we offer experiential learning experiences while abroad. So internships, volunteering, field trips, a lot to do outside of the classroom. And we've been doing this since 1982. So 40-year anniversary, we're here. And then just quickly choosing your program. There are a lot of aspects that go into finding your perfect program. No matter where a student chooses, it will be a great life-changing experience, but self-reflection is really important when thinking about your identity. You need to ask yourself, what is most important to you and what opportunities match with that? So is it graduating on time? Is it getting certain courses? Is it you really want to go to a certain country, maybe a heritage trip? That'll help you choose your location. And then you can see other things to consider here. So courses, costs, location, personal goals, diversity, inclusion, we'll talk about more, and if you want to do an internship. So I want to quickly mention USAC's overall vision and mission and highlight select values. USAC is committed to providing access to affordable, academically rigorous, and enriching cross-cultural learning abroad for all students to develop the knowledge, skills, and attitudes to succeed in today's global society. We celebrate diversity and value its impact on the study abroad experience of our students. We strive to increase access, inclusion, equity, and support for underrepresented student populations. Our vision is a world where differences are appreciated and respected. Mission is to inspire international learning and engaged global citizenship through affordable, culturally authentic academic experiences. And our values are authenticity, adaptability, collaboration, dedication, diversity, excellence, integrity, and impact. So quickly, this is our organizational DEI work within USAC. So we have a commitment to affordability. That is really what we pride ourselves on. And then we offer scholarships to increase access. We are always learning, evolving, and adopting inclusive language. So we recently added non-binary as an option on a student application. There's a lot to do, a lot more to be done, and we will always continue growing and changing things to the adapting environment. We partner with organizations like Diversity Abroad, Forum on Education Abroad, NAFSA, Diverse International Women of Color. We have a USAC DEI committee being put together. We do faculty and resident director research. So the resident director knows a lot about equity within that country that the student will be in, and that they will learn a lot about identities and equity in their orientation. There's training for central office and international staff. And then we have equal opportunity and affirmative action employee, a commitment to that when hiring practices. Sorry, I got a little stumbled on my words there. So going into while abroad, students can also take social justice classes. This is just a quick couple examples. There are a lot more options out there with partnership and specialist programs, specialty. So some examples are LGBTQ+ within a certain location. So they'll learn about the LGBTQ+ experience and history within those locations. And then there's a lot of diversity and equity classes, mental health, gender. Really just depends on what the student wants to take, but there are opportunities to learn more while abroad. And now, sorry.
Yeah, I can take over just to get us started for this next section. So we just wanted to get more into, how identity and your various identities are very important, and they can definitely impact your study abroad experience. So kind of a quote to get us started that I really like is that to remember that no two people in any community will have the same experience. So leave room to create your own. So just keeping that in mind as we go through, we definitely can't address or personally speak to or cover all identities. And it can be a very personal journey, both before, during, and after your study abroad. And so we just want to acknowledge, again, it can be very different based on your own story and background. For today, we won't touch as much on allyship, but we'll try to include a lot of different helpful resources at the end that hopefully can help students of all kinds of different identities kind of so that you can reference those and use those in your own research and preparation, and even in that post-abroad period when you're dealing with reverse culture shock and so forth. And I think it's also good to acknowledge too that, in cases, different aspects of identity, such as race or gender, can be perceived very differently abroad. What our situation is in the US, it might look completely different, very different, somewhat similar, but somewhat different wherever you end up going. So it's always important to research your locations, your local culture, and just to try to check in with yourself throughout the experience. And another little note I wanted to add too is just to make sure you don't ever feel pressured to be a spokesperson for your identity or feeling the need to have to explain yourself. I know there's a lot, sometimes that idea of being kind of this quote unquote ambassador while you're abroad, and that's very true, but just know you can do that on your own terms. You certainly don't have to get into it. I would also say for us with USAC, we would definitely recommend disclosing anything that you're comfortable with to us. So this could be maybe a learning difference you have, or a concern about your gender identity or something like that, just so that we can support you, connect you with local resources. Our local on-site staff know a lot about their home communities. We just really want you to, we certainly hope and we want you to feel safe and open with their staff as much as you're comfortable. So from here, I'll switch it back to Victoria, kind of go a little bit into our terms and concepts for today.
So talking about terms and concepts when discussing these things, we think it's important to move towards the word minoritized when discussing student populations. The move towards minoritized shows that it's a situation that has been imposed on the group by the society we live in, and it changes depending on where you are. So we prefer that term over marginalized or minority. What are intersectional identities? That's kind of the building of your different identities. So your identity sandwich is what I've heard used in social justice classes. So for example, me as a white woman would have more privilege than say a woman of color. And those are my intersecting identities showing where I am. And then why is identity important for study abroad? It's important to know and look at safety before going. Safety can't be guaranteed, so you want to make sure you look at those countries. But of course, doing your research will make that a lot better. And then self-reflection, just to encourage your own personal development and ensure you can have the best time while you're abroad. And then access. Study abroad is majorly white women, so creating access to study abroad by making sure it is accessible to students of color, LGBTQ plus students, disabled students, different identities and minoritized students. So those are the three big things of why we think identity is important. So how can identity impact your experience? It's important to self-reflect. No one knows yourself better than you. Take some time to reflect on your identities and the experience you would like to have abroad when choosing a location. How far out of your comfort zone can you go while caring for yourself and looking after your mental health? Consider the experiences you've had on campus. How would you see yourself interacting with the community in the country you're looking at? Considering safety, so what will my positionality be with my intersecting identities? The US Department of State does an annual country report on human rights practices, and we'll talk about that a bit later. So you can specifically see if that country has any issues with your identity. And then we have resources to promote safety. So you can always reach out to our health and safety team, read our blogs, or check out our equity and inclusion website. And finally, planning ahead is huge. So talking to family and friends is a really big one as well. So making sure that you understand their concerns. If they have concerns about you going abroad, try to relate to them, and then come prepared. Know what kind of questions they might ask, prepare answers to that. Let them know that you've done your research and that the benefits of studying abroad outweigh the costs that they perceive. And then we'll talk about financial aid a little bit later and access to necessities and comforts. Everyone's different, so think about your day, what you use throughout that day. You might go to a country that doesn't have access to the hair care you need, so you might want to bring that with you. So just making sure you have everything that will keep you happy while abroad. Further reflection before selecting a location or deciding to go abroad is important. So we have some good examples here of questions to ask yourself. I'll quickly read out a few, but I recommend students take a screenshot of this so they can just reflect on them longer, write down their answers, and think about it deeply. So how will aspects of my identity be perceived abroad? What stereotypes do I have about people from the country I'm going to? How much of my identity do I plan on sharing with others while abroad? Are there cultural norms and/or laws that could affect my safety in regards to expressing my identity abroad? Am I prepared to educate others about my identity abroad? What strategies do I have for interacting with others who may not support my identity? And if you are a DACA student, have you discussed your plans to study abroad with your lawyer or Title IX office at your home university?
And I'm going to pop back in for this slide. I feel like culture shock deserves its own presentation. So we can hopefully talk on that topic more, but really just reminding folks, if you haven't heard of culture shock, it's it's often portrayed as kind of like a process or a cycle. I would highlight that it can go through stages. So typically, if you first arrive somewhere, you might have this honeymoon phase where everything's new and exciting, you're so happy. And then it comes to a phase where you feel that adjustment period of suddenly not knowing what half the things are in the grocery store isn't so fun. It's kind of frustrating, or maybe you can't find that X product that you're used to having, or why does everyone say X or perceive time differently? So again, we all go through it. And then generally speaking, we tend to reach an acceptance phase with work and reflection. And that's where, not that you become like your host culture or you have to completely change yourself, but you learn to accept and understand where you are and feel more comfortable in your environment. You can use the train by yourself comfortably. You'll understand maybe what are the, maybe a highly contextual language versus a low context language, things like that. So for today, I just wanted to bring this up just to note how perhaps your own identities might actually factor into your culture shock, because you might have different circumstances, backgrounds, different cultures going into this experience. But really, again, just remember, this is kind of an ongoing process that ebbs and flows. So definitely check in with yourself, be mindful. And again, reverse culture shock is also very real. So again, there's going to be more supports for this, but just keeping on the back of your mind. And then now we're going to switch over to benefits. So this will include some student stories, hearing student voices, general tips, advice. So I'll go ahead and give this back to Victoria to talk about.
I think it's important to stress that minoritized students stand to gain the most from study abroad. There needs to be validation there, and these students need to understand that study abroad is for them, and they should expect it within their higher education degree. There are a lot of professional benefits, great on a resume, academics. Study abroad is a high impact practice. There have been a lot of studies done proving that. So students go abroad and come back, and sometimes their academics improve. Language learning is important. It has come up in every single one of my interviews that I have a major in German that I got while abroad. Cross-cultural communications is essential, I think, if you're going to be working in a globalized world, and it's a really hard thing to learn about on campus without experiencing another culture. So that is just very valuable. And then personal benefits, growth, acceptance, confidence, and heritage trips. We could really spend hours talking about the benefits of study abroad. There's a lot of research, and there are a lot of studies being done currently and that have already been done. There are studies being done showing that students who might identify as LGBTQ+ are more likely to come out while abroad. There are a lot of student development theories revolving around study abroad. So it is overall a really impactful experience for students, as I'm sure all of you know because you're here. But I think we really need to work to make it more accessible to our minoritized students because they have so much to gain. Now I'm going to pass it to Caroline. We're going to talk about some student stories and then our own stories.
Yeah, so I'll definitely let you read this one, but just kind of in summary, this student studied abroad in Basque Country, which we have programs on the France side and Spain. So they kind of shared how they really kind of related to the struggle of the Basque people, especially for her own identity as a Chicana woman. So this is really interesting how she felt this connection to her professors, connection to the language, and trying to kind of seeing parallels between the environment she was in, her kind of, study abroad space versus her own home environment back in the US. And then for the next story, I'll have Victoria share that one.
This student went abroad as an LGBTQ+ male, and he wrote for our blog a beautiful story. I recommend going and reading it. But just some quick quotes that we pulled out. I am more optimistic for positive change, and I am able to show up in spaces more authentically. I was able to better understand the fluidity of gender and sexuality. I am an even bigger advocate for human rights and freedom. I have been able to speak with people from around the world about what civil liberties look like for them, and I am able to spread that information to folks home in the States.
And just for another student, this is from Being Black in Spain. We have a whole section of our blog that brings up articles related to identity. So again, we're going to reference it later, but the blog is so great to hear from students directly. So in this case, the student talked about her advice to any student would be just to go for it, to do it. And I thought it was really poignant at the end of her quote that she talks about how in Spain, she wasn't just Black, she wasn't just a minority, she was an American, and that meant more to her than anyone will ever know. So there's just so much to learn and discover, and so many things that you can, find more about when you go abroad and kind of negotiate your own identity and how you see yourself.
And I'm going to talk a little bit about my story. So I am obviously very passionate about this topic. I see a few people in the audience that I've worked with before, and I'm sure you've heard me talk about it before. But before studying abroad, my life was dictated pretty much by trauma. I had a really bad eating disorder. I was just living a very unsustainable lifestyle on campus. And I met up with my study abroad advisor, and he convinced me to do a year in Germany, which I had never thought I would ever do. I had never left California at this point in time, so definitely never left the country. It was pretty scary. I knew nothing about the German language or culture, but I decided to sign up. And it was a really life-changing experience. So the first 6 weeks I spent with a host family. And in that time, I got to learn the simplicity of life. So they made these massive German meals of homemade egg noodles, like 12 different types of sausages. Every meal was just so incredible and like just bountiful. So I learned for the first time in my life that food can mean love, and that it was really transformative experience for me. My host family just really loved us unconditionally. And by the time I left my tiny town of Bittelbron, within 6 weeks, I had actually gotten over my eating disorder. I still had a long way to go mental health wise, but it was a really big change for my life and very beneficial. And then in my second semester, I moved into a high-rise dorm with Syrian refugees. Before going abroad, I had political ideologies that I probably wouldn't agree with today. And once I met all of these people in my building that were from Syria and they were fleeing their country, it really changed me. The biggest part of it being receiving calls from home, asking what I was doing to stay safe, if I was scared, why am I traveling at this time? And that started to really offend me, because there was a little kid downstairs that I would play soccer with every morning. Or was it the girl in my class who fought really hard to get to Germany and lost a lot of people she loved before getting there? That was the first time I was forced to look at my privilege, and it was a transformative experience. I returned to the US, and I was an accounting major at the time. I changed my career path to international ed. I met up with my study abroad advisor, and she told me how to get into the field. And I just knew that I wanted to give back to students and help them have an experience like I did. Since then, I've gone abroad a few more times. I've lived in Thailand, England, and Spain. And each time has been incredibly transformative. So when I was in Spain, I came out as a member of the LGBTQ plus community, which is funny because most of my study abroad group actually came out while they were abroad as well. We were a group of 12, and I think 5 people came out as some sort of part of the LGBTQ plus community. And then on my trip to Thailand, I was diagnosed with PTSD, and that was really great for my mental health. I finally had a diagnosis. I knew how to get better, and it was a long road, but I don't think I would be where I am, or I would be in this amazing job that I love, have the people around me that I adore, if it weren't for experiencing these study abroad moments or intercultural communication moments and seeing the world. Of course, there are a lot of lows with those highs, and everyone who studied abroad has seen it. So it's not all sunshine and rainbows, but I am really happy with where I am, and study abroad was an incredibly life-changing experience that is probably the reason I'm alive today.
And now I'm going to share a little bit about my own story, but I just have to say thank you for sharing that, Victoria. I was very moved. So I'm so grateful that you're willing to kind of open up and kind of share this with everyone who's here today. So for my story, a little bit different, in some ways alike, I think. I was a student who, I'm trying to remember how it even happened, but I got obsessed with Japan sometime in elementary school, and I never really let that one go. But I lived in a small town in South Carolina. It was so hard. There weren't as many learning apps back in the day. So when I finally made it to college, I was so excited to like study Japanese. I met a handful of Japanese study abroad students. But I knew in my heart, I just really wanted to go to Japan. And so I took a leap of faith and I went for a year-long program with USAC in Nishinomiya, Japan. I remember at the time I could go for a full year on a USAC program for what other programs were offering for just one semester. So I thought, hey, you know, financially, it's actually a little bit cheaper overall, even with my living costs to go abroad. I got special scholarships. It was just such amazing timing and opportunity to finally explore this country I was so interested in. And so for me, my first semester, I opted into living with a homestay. So this first picture is my first day with my homestay in Nishinomiya, Japan. So you can see my sign. It was so sweet, and I could talk more about that, but I actually do have a presentation for USAC Week about homestays tomorrow. So please feel free to come back and I'll share more about that. But I guess kind of to keep the story a little bit short, I just wanted to focus on how I had so many different firsts while I was studying abroad. It was, of course, not of course, but in my case, it was my first time ever living abroad, first time doing a homestay. And then it was also one of my first times really using Japanese. Up to this point, I was so shy and embarrassed and overwhelmed. So it gave me, my homestay especially really made me feel comfortable. When I arrived, I could barely piece together a sentence. And by the end of my experience, I was not fluent, but I could speak comfortably, connect my thoughts, speak in full sentences. And something that was really helpful is learning how to speak around what you can't say. So I could describe, if I didn't know the word or the grammar, I could ask for help. And it was just a wonderful experience for my language learning. I don't think I would have ever gotten over that fear of speaking Japanese if I wasn't in Japan on study abroad, and especially have to give so much credit to my homestay as well as my Japanese language program. All the professors were so amazing and really helpful and really opened me up out of my shell. And also I kind of relate to Victoria because on this USAC program, we had a relatively small cohort of American students, as well as lots of internationals and plenty of opportunities to meet Japanese friends, which I was very happy to make Japanese local friends. But this was my first time ever having a group of friends that were all queer. And it was such a wonderful experience for me coming from a very conservative part of the South where I didn't feel very comfortable at the time. I also relate in terms of it was the first time I ever came out. It was really, it's an opportunity, I think, or one personal anecdote I can share why I think this is it's an opportunity to not just like reinvent yourself, but that, you know, you don't have people in your life from when you were younger or people that might potentially hold you back or you fear that judgment. You can kind of be who you are and make friends that appreciate who you are. And I just felt like it was a space with my friends and Japan in general. It felt very comfortable for me. So that was so impactful and meaningful. And even on kind of a similar note, I'll mention too, I would say studying abroad in my, towards the second half of my second semester, I had one of my first major depressive episodes as like a young adult. I'd had stuff before, but I hadn't really put a finger on what it was. And so during that time, it wasn't easy, but I actually really felt supported. I included this picture. It's a little embarrassing, but the picture in the middle is at my sort of graduation ceremony for study abroad. And it makes me want to cry just seeing it. But my professors really understood and kind of, they were just very much there for me and kind of gave me that grace when I was in a rough spot. So of course I'm going to cry on a recording for everyone, but this is just to show, I guess, how much emotion and how real it was for me. So I just wanted to share for you all in terms of, you might not have the same experience, but just knowing there are so many different support networks. My professors were amazing. My international office was amazing. USAC staff was always there. And of course, all of my wonderful friends. So before I cry more on this recording, I'll go ahead and pass it back or go into the resource section, I should say. But just again, to share the story of, you know, study abroad won't fix your problems, but it's also a really great opportunity to learn more about yourself and really grow and develop that pride and kind of, again, learn a lot more about yourself than if you had stayed in the same location with the same friends that you might have otherwise had. So, okay, I'm going to switch gears and move into our resources. So this part of the presentation, I know it's going to be a lot of info. Feel free to screenshot it, or everything can be found on our website. We do have a QR code later on that you can use too. But kind of the goal is just to provide you resources and tools that you can use whenever you have the time. Maybe this weekend you can start to peruse some like blog articles, whatever else, so that you can reflect, research, and kind of prepare. So the first kind of chunk of resources are with USAC. So we have a lot of really great full circle support. So this helps you not just during your study abroad, but way before you go, from application phase, preparation, pre-departure. Of course, all the wonderful program advisors help you so much with logistical things like visas and booking travel and things like that. But they also help you a lot with orientation. Of course, there's going to be on-site orientation with our wonderful on-site staff. So like we mentioned before, our resident directors and on-site staff are really amazing. They're able to provide you identity-related info as well as local resources for your orientation period, as well as just materials and whenever you want that support. So again, I want to highlight how great our health and safety team is. You can always reach out to them. They have a 24/7 line as well. And then we have our advising hub where you can find recorded videos with tips, whatever, webinars, as well as, you can book an appointment with our program advisors. Again, just so many different support options for both our central office staff based in the US, as well as our international staff too. And kind of a fun little note too, is that many of our staff do identify as some type of either minoritized or underrepresented group. So they're really extraordinary sources of support, especially even for me, and just to learn from their own personal experience. Another quick little point too is for alumni. Those are great resources to speak to students who have studied abroad. And we can actually connect you with USAC student alumni. So feel free to reach out to us. Our program advisors have a way to connect you with local students. So that might be very helpful if you want to speak directly to a student. And another point too with our health and safety team I forgot to mention is just noting that they're really good about answering any kind of health, safety, well-being kind of questions. So if you're concerned about laws, immigration, any of those kind of big picture things, please feel free to reach out. We can talk about medications and so forth. So that's always a resource for you. And then the last thing I'll note for this slide is just your own home university. I think typically the study abroad office is happy to help students. Definitely always recommend talking to financial aid if you ever get confused. And your campus might have some sort of like DEI office, or maybe there's a student club. From personal experience, I know I worked somewhere with a counseling center that had special support groups for students, including helping students deal with reverse culture shock. So again, just peruse, take your time. There's lots of different people to go to for help and support. So in terms of the digital side, maybe a good place to start. If you don't want to directly make an appointment with anyone, you can always just go to our website. That's kind of where you can find everything if you go to our website. A couple points I'll highlight is our equity inclusion page, which is what the QR code will take you to. This again has a list of resources, but there are other parts of the website that you might find helpful. So that health and safety page, there you can find topics on well-being and safety, FAQ type things. Our scholarship database is awesome. So not only does USAC provide so many wonderful scholarships, we also have resources to link you to other external scholarships. So I like to say it's a good place to start if you're looking for scholarships, as well as giving you more info on program billing questions, how that works. We give you tips and tricks for helping you with scholarship applications. So definitely give it a look. And then, like I mentioned on the previous slide, we do have that virtual advising hub. So you can look at recordings or videos, or like today's session was advertised on that section of the website, as well as you can actually book appointments directly with USAC staff. So you can ask all of your questions. Another resource we've mentioned several times at this point is our blog. So there's a whole Identity Abroad section. So this is a lovely place to start. We have so many different articles linked. Similar to this are Celebrating the Black Voices of USAC. Again, has so many great articles and blog posts. And this is just a good opportunity to learn or learn directly from fellow students and alumni. Then just a couple other quick articles are our 40 plus LGBTQ plus friendly locations. So definitely give that a look if you're curious. And then even in terms of that allyship or whatever it might be, we do have an article about how to be respectful of diversity in your group. So many topics, but please check it out if you have the time. The next little category of resources I wanted to touch on is something we call packing your suitcase. So we have packing your suitcase as a first generation student, LGBTQ+, as well as BIPOC students. So these are great. There's all kinds of resources. It's a really great place to go for reflection. There's a workbook. So definitely check that out as well. And then lastly, I just had to include our socials. This is a good place, again, to hear from students, see posts, get inspired. So many videos on YouTube. Our podcast also recently posted our recent Black and Abroad panel. And I forgot to put on here, but we do also have TikTok. So please check it out and kind of get inspired through that. And now shifting gears. So I talked a lot about all of our USAC resources, but of course there's a whole wide world out there. There can sometimes be some of that difficulty finding the right resource as a minoritized student. But these are really great options. And of course, USAC, we're constantly adding and improving our resource material base. So you can find a lot of these connected on our diversity and inclusion page, as well as actually many, many more. But you can always take a screenshot or again, visit our website. There's so many great groups out there that would love to support you. So just to give a few concrete examples, I know it can be a lot to navigate all these different pages, particularly for the government websites I'll start with. So first of all, we have travel.gov or travel.state.gov. They actually have really incredible guides for US citizens related to all types of travelers. So I didn't include all of them in the screenshot, but they have options for women travelers, LGBTQI travelers, traveling even with pets, faith-based travelers, and so many more. So definitely check this out. Of course, there's even more information on this page. I included I point out there's the before you go, country information, while abroad, and emergencies. And so we generally recommend students to enroll in STEP. But again, our health and safety team, you'll find about all of this kind of logistical, STEP and other health and safety emergency protocols. But just to note, whenever you want to look into it, there's definitely resources you can access now. And kind of a similar vein, the Department of State also has these great country reports on human rights practices. Victoria did mention these earlier. Again, I just wanted to highlight where to find it. You can always just Google it, and I'm sure you can get to it that way. But there's multiple years of reports. And I really recommend, if you have the time, just take a look. It's a really good resource. Another big one you might have heard about, it's very popular in study abroad circles, is an organization called Diversity Abroad. So they have a website directed more for students and colleges. So there you can find scholarships, as well as a whole multitude of articles and resources. So in particular, for this slide, I actually highlighted their Diversity and Inclusion Abroad guide. If you were able to scroll down on the real website, you could see there's different categories they speak to and different identities. So once again, another great resource. I hope this isn't overwhelming, but just whenever you feel the need to look into it, definitely check this one out as well. And then the last one I'll highlight for now is ILGA. I like to recommend ILGA for anyone who's more visual. So they're really known for creating these maps. So they have a trans safety map. This is one of their famous sexual orientation laws in the world. just to get a kind of a sense about different locations and countries on a broader scale. They also do various reports and data sets. So again, this is more focused on LGBTQ plus identities, but it is, again, a good resource. And I'm trying to speed through, but feel free to take a screenshot of this slide as well. This is all on our website under our scholarship page. But I did really want to make sure to highlight some of our wonderful Access scholarships. So in particular, we do actually have an Access, Equity, and Inclusion scholarship. This can be a really good option for students of all sorts of identities. So if you're first gen, maybe you have religious diversity, students with disabilities or learning differences, all sorts of options there, as well as some other categories such as STEM scholarships and broader underrepresented groups of students. As well, we have our general category of scholarships and then our program specific. And then if you are a UNR student, we do have a first gen category for Nevada, as well as this Health Diversity and Inclusion Scholarship. And then the last one I'm going to point out is Diverse International Women of Color. This organization does provide scholarships. They recently posted the application for the 2022 year. So we do partner with them and match those scholarships. So I've been doing a lot of talking at you and sharing all these different options, but please check out our scholarship page for more info. We also try to make our scholarship application process as painless as possible. So it's integrated into our online application. So it's a very great option for USAC students. And then this is kind of my summary of, again, referencing you to our website and our blog. If you use this particular QR code, it will take you to our Equity and Inclusion website. And then I've reached the end of our main content. I know this is a little bit of a topic change here, but we just wanted to quickly mention, as part of USAC Week, we do have a passport contest going on right now. So during the week, we'll post 3 questions to our webpage. And you can find the answers by coming to sessions like this or exploring our website and reading some of our digital resources. And then based on answering those questions, social media posting, et cetera, you can earn more points. So definitely check out the website for more details, but basically there will be a variety of prizes. For example, some students will win a Frosh flight voucher, as well as lots of students will win USAC swag bags. All right, so we've gone to the end of our main talking at you phase. So I'm going to try to transition us to any questions. So please feel free in the chat, unmute yourself. We're really happy to hear from you. And I'll go ahead and stop that recording at this point.